The lights of Edinburgh shone brightly as James and I walked along the cobblestone streets, a perfect backdrop to celebrate our first anniversary. The cool night air carried with it an intoxicating perfume of history and romance, and I couldn't help but think about how far we had come together. The castle in the background, illuminated, seemed to witness our happiness, as if the very place were blessing us. "Look at that, James," I exclaimed, pointing at the castle. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined." He smiled, his gaze lost in the vastness of the view. "It's incredible, isn't it?" "Almost as incredible as you," he replied, pulling me closer. I felt my heart race at the touch of his hand on my waist. The city pulsed around us, and as we walked, I remembered all the special moments we had shared over the past year. From our first meeting at the cafe on the corner to the endless nights spent talking about dreams and plans for the future. Time had flown, and every moment with him felt like a gift. "Do you remember our first trip together?" I asked, laughing at the mishaps we had experienced. "How could I forget?" he said with a mischievous smile. "You almost lost us on the way to the beach because you were distracted looking at a cat." "Hey, that cat was adorable," I defended, laughing even more. "But okay, maybe I got a bit carried away." James laughed, and as he looked into my eyes, I saw a deep connection that felt unbreakable. That night in Edinburgh, everything felt perfect. We were ready to celebrate not just 1 year together, but what we hoped would be a lifetime. After a while, we found a cozy restaurant with candles lit and soft music playing in the background. The atmosphere was ideal for a romantic dinner. As soon as we sat down, James took my hand and wrapped his fingers around it, a simple gesture that made me feel safe. "I'm so happy we're here, Laura," he said, looking into my eyes. "I promised I'd always be by your side, and I intend to keep that promise." I felt a flutter in my stomach at his words. It was as if he were reaffirming everything I already believed. The conversation flowed naturally, full of laughter and smiles. "And what about our plans for the future?" I asked, giving a slight smile. "Have you thought about us living together?" James's expression changed. He hesitated, and that immediately sparked a pang of worry within me. He pulled back slightly, as if he were pondering something complicated. I've been thinking about it," but he stopped, searching for the words. "Living together is a big decision, Laura. It's not something you do lightly." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I thought we were on the same page. "We talked about this before, didn't we?" "Yes, we did," he replied, but his voice was hesitant. I don't know if I'm completely ready to take that step yet." The atmosphere around us seemed to cool. What had once been a celebration was now a minefield of insecurities. I wanted to understand what was happening with him, but doubt began to haunt my mind. "James, are you saying you're not sure about us?" I asked, trying to remain calm. The last thing I wanted was for the night to end in a fight. "It's not that, Laura. I just need time to think." He looked down, as if avoiding my gaze. "Time?" Disbelief took hold of me. "James, we've been together for a year. What more do you need?" He sighed, and I could see the internal struggle on his face. The light and romantic mood that had enveloped us was now dissipating, giving way to a palpable tension. "I just don't want things to change between us, and living together would change everything," he finally said, frustration evident in his voice. Those words echoed within me. The insecurity he expressed began to make me question everything. I didn't know if I was ready to face what might come next. The argument between James and me escalated quickly, as if a fuse had been lit in my chest. The words that had once floated in promises of love were now turning into cutting weapons. The atmosphere of the restaurant, which had once been inviting and romantic, now felt suffocating. I looked into James's eyes and saw a mix of confusion and frustration. "Why didn't you tell me earlier that you had doubts about us?" My voice came out louder than I expected, and James's expression hardened. "I didn't want to hurt you, Laura. I just need more time to figure out what I want," he replied, shaking his head as if trying to push his own thoughts away. "More time?" I questioned, my heart racing. "We've been together for a year, James. I thought we were building something solid. Do you think I don't deserve to know what's really going on in your head?" "Of course you deserve to know, but I didn't know how to tell you." I'm struggling with this. His voice, which had been calm, was now charged with emotion. He stood up, making the chair scrape against the floor. You can't just expect me to have all the answers right away. I looked at him, feeling as if an ocean of resentment opened up between us. And you can't just expect me to accept your insecurities without an explanation. I feel like you're pulling away from me, James. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. I'm not pulling away from you, Laura. I just need time to process all of this. Things are changing, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. Those words hit my heart like an arrow. What did he mean by changes? I wanted to scream, but instead, I just shook my head, feeling like the conversation was turning into a maze with no exit. Maybe you should have thought about this before making promises of eternal love, I murmured, feeling a mix of pain and anger. So that's it? You're willing to throw everything away because of a doubt. The incredulity in his voice hurt me. Laura, I love you. Love isn't enough, James. I shouted, feeling the tears stream down my face. If you can't be honest with me, then what do we have? What's left of us? He hesitated, his eyes softening, but I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, pulling my bag tightly. I need some time. I need time away from you to think, I declared, already moving away. Laura, wait. James called, but I ignored him. The doors of the restaurant closed behind me with a snap, and as I stepped out into the cold streets of Edinburgh, the icy air hit me like a bucket of cold water. The city, which once seemed magical, was now just a tangle of lights and shadows. I walked aimlessly, the cobblestone streets reflecting their lights onto my confused emotional state. My tears froze on my face, and I felt as if I were in a movie where everything around me was in slow motion. The argument still echoed in my mind, and the uncertainty about the future consumed me. As I walked, I lost track of time until suddenly I saw Clara, an old friend, standing on the corner. She greeted me with a warm smile, but quickly noticed my downcast expression.
Laura.
What happened? Clara asked, concerned. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. James and I had a fight. He isn't sure about us. I don't know what to think anymore. I confessed, my voice choked. Come on, let's sit for a bit, Clara suggested, pulling me into a nearby cafe. We sat at a table in the corner, and she took my hand. You need to take some time to think, she said, sincerity in her eyes. Sometimes, distance can help clarify things. That's what I'm trying to do, but I can't stop thinking about him. I replied, feeling the weight of uncertainty. Laura, I don't want to make you more anxious, but I need to tell you something. Clara hesitated, looking around before continuing. I saw James with another woman at a recent event. Those words cut like a knife. What was I supposed to feel?
Anger?
Betrayal? I could only feel a deep emptiness.
What?
Who was he with? I asked, my voice coming out almost as a whisper. I don't know who she was, but they seemed close. To be honest, it worried me, Clara said, squeezing my hand. You know I only want what's best for you. I don't know what to do now, I murmured, feeling like the ground beneath my feet had crumbled. The conversation that had once seemed like a mere misunderstanding had now transformed into something much more complex and painful. The door to my room was ajar, and the soft light from the lamp illuminated the unmade bed. As I entered, I saw James standing by the window, looking out at the illuminated city of Edinburgh. The light reflecting on his face showed an expression of concern that made me hesitate. My heart pounded, and the anguish that had consumed me since the conversation with Clara intensified. Laura, he said upon hearing my footsteps. His voice was soft, but there was a tension in the air that made me feel as if I was about to explode. Where have you been? I was thinking, I replied, trying to control the anger bubbling inside me. We need to talk. About what? He turned, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. If it's about what happened at the restaurant, I already told you that. No, James. It's about Clara. The mention of her name made his demeanor change instantly. He grew more rigid, and I could see a shadow of nervousness cross his face. Clara? What does she have to do with this? She told me she saw you with another woman at an event. Each word I spoke felt like a blow to his defenses, and I felt a mix of pain and a need to know the truth. Laura, that doesn't make sense. I wasn't with anyone. You know that. He seemed genuinely shocked, but the doubt beginning to root itself in my heart was like a virus, corroding everything around it. But what if it's true? What if you're hiding something from me? Frustration made me raise my voice. How can I trust you now? James took a step toward me, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Look, I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you. Clara must have misunderstood. Misunderstood? How can I believe that? I was on the verge of tears, the image of Clara talking about the woman she saw with him replaying in my mind. You can't just say you love me and expect that to fix everything. He took a deep breath, as if trying to calm himself. Tell me the truth, Laura. What do you really think? You know me. You know I'm not that kind of person. I don't know who you are anymore, I replied, the words coming out colder than I intended. You seem so distant. What else are you hiding? A heavy silence settled between us, and I felt the suffocating weight of uncertainty. He looked away, and that hit me with overwhelming force. Laura, I swear I'm not hiding anything. What Clara saw could have been misinterpreted. I have complicated family issues, but that has nothing to do with our relationship. Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me in? The fragility of the situation left me vulnerable, and I found myself fighting back tears. Anger mixed with sadness, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Because I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it alone, he said, his voice low and full of regret. But now I see that was a mistake. A mistake? James, this isn't just a mistake. This is about trust. And now all I feel is doubt. He moved closer, trying to touch my hand, but I pulled away. Laura, please. Let's work this out together. You're the only person that matters to me. But at that moment, his words felt empty. The seed of doubt had already been planted in my heart, and I didn't know if I could uproot it. What I wanted to know was the truth. And with that in mind, an idea began to take shape in my head. If he wasn't willing to open his heart completely, maybe I needed to find out for myself. I need some time, I said finally, my voice trembling. Time to think. James looked at me, his eyes filled with despair. Laura, don't do this. Please. But I had already made my decision. I needed answers, and I was willing to go after them, even if it meant distancing myself from him for a while. The night was cold in Edinburgh, and I felt as if I were in a nightmare. The icy air seemed to cut through my skin as I walked the streets, trying to process everything I had discovered. The image of James laughing and chatting with Sophie replayed in my mind like a movie I couldn't stop. What had happened to the eternal love he promised me? I looked up at the overcast sky and wondered if the stars still remembered us. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to confront James. On an impulse, I decided that I would go after them. My heart raced in my chest as I walked toward the bar where Clara had told me they usually met. With each step, anxiety grew, but the determination to discover the truth guided me. When I arrived at the location, the bar was lit with warm lights that seemed welcoming, but to me, everything felt dark. Through the window, I saw James sitting at a table with Sophie across from him. They were so close, laughing at something he had said. The scene hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't breathe. Clara's words echoed in my mind. I saw James with another woman, and now I was witnessing it up close. I took a deep breath, my heart in my throat, and walked into the bar. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and music, but all I could hear was my own heart pounding out of control. I walked toward the table, and when James saw me, his smile crumbled. Sophie looked between us, confused, but not for long. She sensed the tension in the air and quickly fell silent. Laura, what are you doing here? James asked, trying to maintain his composure, but his voice betrayed a tone of nervousness. I came to see what you were doing with Sophie, I replied, my voice steady, although my insides were in tatters. You didn't answer my messages, James. What's going on between you two? Sophie looked at James, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I can explain, he began, but I didn't want to hear it. The pain and betrayal were too intense. Explain? Do you really think you can explain this? I saw you two laughing, as if I didn't matter. I said, my voice choked with emotion. Laura, it's not what you think, James said, trying to approach me, but I stepped back. Sophie is just a friend. There's nothing between us. A friend? I laughed, but it wasn't a funny laugh. You both look way too close to be just friends. What else are you hiding from me, James? The tension escalated, and I could feel the curious gazes of other bar patrons. I didn't care. What more could I lose? You lied to me. You told me you were committed, that you loved me. And now this. Laura, I promise it's nothing. Sophie was going through a tough time, and I was just helping her. This has nothing to do with us, he replied, with a sincerity that, at any other moment, might have convinced me. But now, I couldn't believe a thing. So you cheated on me with your friend? I asked, the anger and pain blending in my words. You can't expect me to believe that. That's not how things are, James exclaimed, his frustration visible. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. What I understand is that I can't trust you, I replied, feeling every word was a cutting blade. The truth was, I didn't want to believe he could do this to me, but the evidence was right in front of me. Laura, please don't do this, he pleaded, his face showing desperation. I don't want to lose you, but you've already lost me, I said, feeling the tears streaming down my face. You've broken the trust we had between us. Love cannot exist without trust. Sophie, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. James, maybe it's best if you take some time and talk to Laura, she suggested, looking at me with an understanding gaze. No, Sophie. I don't want to hear anything else, I said, feeling the anger transform into deep sadness. I can't continue like this. This relationship isn't healthy for me. With one last look at James, I turned and left the bar, leaving behind the laughter and music that now echoed like a lament in my ears. Tears flowed freely, and the pain of abandonment and betrayal consumed me. I had made the decision to end it all, but the weight of that choice pressed heavily on my heart. What was love if not a way to lose yourself in someone, only to find yourself again amid the pain? It was a cold morning in London, and I found myself looking out the window of my apartment, watching people rush by, each with their own stories. My heart still felt heavy, a shadow of the betrayal that had hit me hard. The memories of Edinburgh wouldn't let me be, and I felt as if I were trapped in a dense fog, unsure how to find the light again. Laura, are you okay? Asked my coworker, Alice, as she observed me lost in thought. I forced a smile, but inside, the pain consumed me. Work became my refuge, a way to distract myself from the emotional storm that still dominated me. Just thinking about some things, I replied, trying to sound lighthearted. Alice nodded, but the concern in her eyes was evident. In the following days, I tried to hold it together, diving into projects and dedicating myself to self-care. I signed up for yoga classes and even started cooking again, something I had always loved but had set aside. With each meal I prepared, I tried to nourish myself, not just physically, but emotionally. I needed to remember who I was before James and all the confusion he brought into my life. James's messages began to come in. He sent me texts, sometimes long, other times just a "I miss you." Each notification made my heart race, but not in the way I wanted. I didn't want to hear his promises that everything could be fixed. I needed space. I needed to discover who I was without him. I ignored the messages, more determined to move on with each passing day. A month later, while working on an important project, I received a call from my manager. Laura, you've been standing out a lot. I'm happy to inform you that you're about to be promoted. My heart leapt with joy, a wave of excitement that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a sign that I was on the right path, that I could rebuild my life. During this time, a new friendship began to blossom with Mark, a co-worker who had always been kind and attentive. He approached me after meeting, asking how I was doing. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here, he said, with a genuine smile. I was surprised by the offer, but at the same time, I felt I needed someone who could listen to me without judgment. As the days passed, Mark became a valuable support. He encouraged me to share my thoughts and fears. "You don't have to carry everything alone, Laura," he said on a rainy afternoon while we were having coffee. "Sometimes, talking about what hurts us can help us heal." I took a deep breath, feeling that I could finally open my heart. "It's hard, you know? I loved someone who disappointed me," I confessed, staring at the bottom of my cup. "And now I don't know if I can trust again." Mark listened intently, as if every word I said was a piece of a puzzle he wanted to understand. "Trust is something that is rebuilt, but you first need to trust yourself," he replied gently. His words resonated within me, and for a moment, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't need to forget James all at once. Instead, I could learn to deal with the pain and maybe even allow new experiences to enter my life. With Mark by my side, I began to glimpse a new future, a future where I could be happy again, without the weight of the past dragging me down. In the meantime, James's messages kept coming, but now I felt a new strength within me. He could no longer define me. I was on a path of self-discovery, and finally, it seemed like I was starting to find the woman who had been lost in the pain of betrayal. The air was heavy that afternoon, and I was nervous. The meeting with James was something I had carefully planned, but now, as I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't recognize the woman staring back at me. The pain of betrayal still throbbed in my chest, but the need for closure was stronger. I took a deep breath and left the apartment, the city pulsating around me as if it were alive, but I felt like a shadow. I arrived at the cafe where we had agreed to meet. The tables were almost empty, and the soft light of the late afternoon filtered through the windows. When I saw James walking in, my heart raced. He looked nervous, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I remembered how he used to look at me, filled with love and promises. But now, it was as if those promises had dissipated into the air. "Hi, Laura," he said, his tone hesitant. "Thank you for coming." "We need to talk, James," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions consuming me. "About you and Sophie." He frowned, confused. "Sophie? What about her?" "Clara told me you were with her, and I saw you two together. There's no way to ignore that." The words came out in a quick flow. I needed to be clear. James took a deep breath, and I realized he was trying to compose himself. "Laura, I can explain." "Explain what? That you were seeing another woman? That you left me in the dark while I tried to understand what was happening between us." The anger and pain were at the surface, and I couldn't hold back the tears. "It's not what you think." He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "Sophie is my cousin. We were resolving some family issues. I never meant to hurt you." My legs trembled. He seemed so sincere, and a part of me wanted to believe him. "Your cousin? Then why didn't you tell me that before? Why leave me in doubt?" I was dealing with the situation. It was complicated, and I didn't want to involve you in something that had nothing to do with us. The vulnerability in his gaze touched a part of my heart, but I was still reluctant. "James, trust is the foundation of any relationship. I can't just ignore all of this. You made me feel insecure." He fell silent for a moment, and the silence between us was heavy. For a brief moment, I saw the James the first loved, the man who promised eternal love. But the wound still burned. "I don't know if I can trust you again." "I understand," he replied, his voice low. "But I truly care about you, Laura. I never wanted this to happen. Please don't give up on us so easily." Those words touched my heart, but I knew I couldn't be fooled again. "It's not easy for me, James. I still love you, but true love shouldn't be a constant struggle. I need someone who's willing to be transparent, someone I can trust." He looked desolate, and I wondered if there was a chance for us. But doubt still lingered between us like a thick fog. "I can't promise this won't happen again, but I want to try. Please give me a chance." I need time," I said, the words coming out softer than I expected. "I can't just go back to being the Laura who trusted you without a second thought." It was at that moment that the cafe door opened and Mark walked in. Upon seeing me, his face lit up. He walked toward us, and I could sense something more in his gaze.
Hi, Laura.
"Hi, James," he said, the tension in the air almost palpable. "Hi, Mark," I replied, feeling a bit relieved by his presence. "Is everything okay?" he asked, looking at me with concern. "We're just talking," I said, forcing a smile. But inside me, something was changing. Mark's presence was like a breath of fresh air amidst the storm that was my life. "If you need anything, I'm here," Mark said, his voice soft and comforting. As James and I exchanged glances, I realized that true love shouldn't be a constant struggle. And while uncertainty still surrounded me, a new possibility began to form in my mind. Mark was there, and maybe it was time to consider a new chapter in my life. Life went on, and I needed to be strong.